Okay, well, hello and welcome to the Connaught Suite here at the Norbreck Hotel, the jewel in the crown of the retro circuit. My name's Neil, and my co-host here is Andrew, and we're very much looking forward to chatting with our special guest today and with you guys. To make sure we get to hear as much as possible from our guest, we ask that if you have any questions, please hold them until the end. There will be time for a Q&A session, and there will be an element of audience participation, which is why I've filled you with sugar. So, and I need you to embrace that. So whenever Andrew or I say two words, I need you to react with shock and awe as if it's the best thing that you've ever heard, okay? And those two words, Andrew, are?
Marathon bar.
Marathon bar. One more time.
Marathon bar.
Yeah. Perfect. So without further ado, Andrew, would you please introduce our very special guest?
Our guest today has many strings in his bow, but we retroheads probably know him best as the talented composer of many of our favourite video game tunes. From as far back as 1985 and on platforms ranging from the ZX Spectrum through to the PlayStation 3 and everything in between.
And to kick off our conversation, we're going to hear a clip from the first of many tunes selected from his heaving back catalogue. Our guest today is Tim Follin. Welcome, Tim.
Hello.
Wait. Just before we start, there's a marathon bar for anybody in the audience that can guess the game name.
Yeah, the game, that's it.
The
game name.
Platform? Just the game name.
Just the game name, yeah. So whoever guesses it gets the marathon bar. Hit it.
Can I play?
We have a winner. What's your name, sir? And you're... I know. And the game is?
Kronos on the Spectrum.
Marathon bar for you. Oh.
I'm blown away that somebody got that so early on. So that was a clip of Kronos on the ZX Spectrum composed by Tim. Tim, you were born in 1970, which would have made you the perfect age to witness the birth of the home computer revolution.
It was.
Whilst you had a young and impressionable mind, did you take an interest in computers before you worked in the industry?
Before I worked in the industry, a little bit, yeah. I was my brother Mike, who's a game programmer now. He's a vicar now. He's not a game programmer now. He got me into the whole thing. He used to sit behind him because he's kind of, 8 years older than me? So he kind of used to sit there with his computer, and I used to sort of sit there watching, trying to work out what he was doing. And so I was kind of got into it that way, yeah, just watching him program and thinking, that's interesting. But it was back in the days when, seeing something on the TV that was something you'd made was a novelty, because you didn't have any camcorders back then. It was
so which
dark
came
ages.
First, though? Was it the computers or
computers? Definitely the computers. Yeah. At that point, it was when I was sort of 13, that kind of age, 14. Yeah, it was computers before music came along. I was into music as well, but
yeah. And how did you come to work on your first game? Did that involve your brother, or did you find some other way in?
That was. Sorry, you can turn it down a bit up. That was when he got a job because he went and did a university degree in chemistry and hated it, and because computers were just coming in at that point. And so he sort of thought, well, I want to do computers, I don't want to do chemistry anymore, this is boring. So, but it was too late to switch courses, so he had to just basically try and find a job in computing. So he got a job in a local shop in St Helens, which was... at that time, I think a lot of, businessmen saw an opportunity, shop owners and people saw an opportunity to make some money on these new computer games, So he opened a shop selling computer games, and then he thought, let's try and make some computer games. So he got people involved, and he actually advertised in the local paper for anyone that was remotely interested in computers to come and try and make some games. So it was that random, really, that happened, So... Mike got a job doing that and did some conversions of things like Star Firebirds, which is an arcade game at the time, And he asked me to do some music because he knew I was tinkering around with sound. So that's how I got into doing the music. Random.
Just before we go on, are the volume levels okay? Can you all hear Tim? Okay, you can hear everything sound. Perfect. So Kronos was on the ZX Spectrum, the machine you had your first commercial release with in Subterranean Striker, correct me if I'm wrong.
That was Mike's game, yeah.
That was Mike's game and you did the music on it. So to say the system's musical capabilities are limited is something of an understatement.
Yeah, it didn't have any musical capabilities.
Were you frustrated by the limitations or was it a challenge that you relished?
It was a programming challenge, definitely, yeah. It was kind of, because I was interested in sound. It kind of, the computing side of it got me interested in how sound works, really, because the Spectrum had a speaker, and you could switch the speaker on or switch it off. That's literally all you could do. So on meant that it moved to one position and off meant it moved to the other position. So if you did that often enough, you heard a sound, a beep sound. So I thought, well, what else can you do with that apart from beep it, and experimented with software until I made it do a kind of different sort of sounds, like a phasing sound at first, by changing the timings between the off and on. That's all that was, and just messing around with it until I could, eventually got 3 channels out of it. Sound, just.
And you would have been 15 or 16 when your first game composition was released.
Yeah.
Was it a hobby for you at this point, or could you already see that there was potentially a career in it for
No,
you?
it was pretty much still a hobby. I think the sort of point where I thought maybe this is potentially a job was when the guy that was the shop owner that published these games originally paid me £100, I think, for this, and that was kind of, oh right, £100, that'll do, which seemed like a lot of money when I was 15. It's kind of someone just hand me over £100, and so at that point, yeah.
Can you remember what you spent it on?
I do actually, yeah. I spent it on a digital delay guitar effects pedal. There you go, because that's what I wanted.
You well spent, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Complete waste of money.
So your credits start to come in thick and fast through 1985 and 1986 on games such as Future Games, The Sentinel and Agent X. And your music is becoming more complex and technically impressive. Did you involve yourself in any of the coding to achieve a more complex sound, or were you purely a composer?
On the Spectrum, yeah. I think I wrote everything. I did all the coding for the Spectrum. As soon as I got to software creations, which was a little bit later on, then programmers took over because we were working on the Commodore 64, which is different programming language. It's 6502 versus Z80, so I didn't know anything about that. So
we will come on to the Commodore 64 a little bit later. So if we listen to your Spectrum games, what kind? You've mentioned the phasing. What other kinds of musical tricks might we hear on a 1987 Spectrum game compared to, say, Star Fireboards in 85? So
not a lot of difference, really. I mean, I think I pushed it as far as it could go pretty early on with it, and I realised that the processor just wasn't fast enough to do anything beyond what I'd sort of got it to do. So I think, I mean, the way it worked was just using this on-off thing. I just had basically lots of little counters. So I'd have a number, a counter counting down to 0 every time. And every time it hit 0, it would click. And so you have 3 counters, and every time it reaches 0, it clicks. Well, if the 3 counters are have different numbers, different values, then they'll all be clicking at different rates, and that gives you 3 frequencies. So that's how I got 3 channels. So to get 4, you can just add more and more numbers, but the overall time is slowing down the more you do that, so the worse it starts to sound, So, I probably hit optimum at about 4, to be honest. And
Well, so you mentioned your guitar effects pedal. Did you have any? Can you remember your musical influences at the time?
Yeah, I do remember my musical influences.
Do you want to share them?
On record.
It's difficult.
We're all friends here, Tim.
I mean, I was, what was I for? 14, 15. I think that was my Genesis phase, I have to say. I'm afraid to admit it. Yeah, Genesis, they were a big influence. I kind of got into, I had older brothers, so they were listening to prog, basically. Genesis, yes. Bit of Jethro Tull, that kind of thing. They were my influences, definitely. Prog.
Yeah. And did you class yourself as a games player as well as a composer, or not really?
By that point, I mean, I did play games earlier on when I was sort of 13, 14 or something, but by the time I got to actually writing them, I think music was the thing I was more into at that point, and I kind of drifted out of the games scene, really. So I wasn't really playing that many games. By the time I was working on them, I wasn't really playing them. So now I still don't know what the actual games look like that I've composed for mostly, unfortunately. I kind of remember all the early stages where they'd say, it's kind of like this, can you put some music to this, Beyond that, I have no idea, to be honest, because once my job was done, I'd be on to something else, and I never even saw the finished game most of the time, so there you go.
Well, the ZX Spectrum was your fleshy-keyed springboard into the industry. You were getting some serious recognition from the press for the quality of your compositions. So let's listen to a clip from another track, this time on the Commodore 64, and there is a marathon bar. Oh. Yeah, for the first person who can identify it.
Congratulations. Oh, there we go. They're ruining it.
It's a bunch of pixels.
So while this is playing, so you're saying this has got Jethro Tull influences?
Jethro Tull phase, yeah.
Yeah. I can get that.
Could you?
Yeah. Bit of Aqualung. It's good.
Why are you shaking your head, Tim?
That's fine.
Yes.
Trying to avoid the cringe.
So no need to cringe, Tim. We love it, even if you don't. That, of course, is Ghouls and Ghosts on the Commodore 64. When did you first get your hands on a Commodore 64, and what did it offer you as a musician that the ZX Spectrum didn't?
It was, not the first time I saw Commodore 64, the first time I kind of used one was at work by the time I got to Suffocation, so it was very much a work thing, when I saw it. It was, a lot of people talked about it at the time saying this is a lot better than, this is a proper music chip in this, so that was the main thing. It had, it still only had 3 channels, but it had 3 actual channels of, sound. You could change the timbre of each sound and that kind of thing, and you could change the, do a lot more with it, basically, yeah.
So do you remember how you used to actually enter music into the computer?
Yeah, because I was programming the original routines, they were as simple as I could make them and get away with, basically. So I was typing in pairs of numbers, so, I'd have one number for the pitch, and one number for how long to play for. Initially, those were just random values, When I came to ask the programmer to write the Commodore 64 driver, I basically thought, well, I might as well just stick with what I know. And so that remained the same. So the pitches then became, on the Spectrum, the pitches were actually frequencies. They weren't even pitches, So it was, I just had to remember the frequencies. But also they'd change. If you played too many high notes at the same time, everything would slow down a little bit. So I'd then have to increase the values, or rather decrease the values slightly to make the pitch the same. So I was actually typing in actual frequencies rather than even notes. So when I got to this Commodore 64, I was typing in notes, but they were still numbers. So it was kind of 120 was middle C, whatever. So I'd remember, okay, I'm going up an octave, so I'm going up 12 notes. Or I'm going up a fifth. I'm going up 7 notes.
So would that have been in BASIC or? Assembly language. Yeah. So I was actually using I was just using a assembly package.
Sorry, it's to assist you with inputting the compositions, you were
Yeah.
coding them in. Did you have a synth off to one side to sort of give you ideas to tinker with, and then you turn and input them, or did it not work like that?
I used to just type them in, to be honest. I didn't really have
The music was in his head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were saying in the green room earlier that those numbers are still embedded in your head. You can still say what
I can still
is.
sort of think. Yeah, I still think in terms of. The thing is, it was kind of liberating because you didn't think in terms of key changes or anything. So if you wanted to go up, into a completely different key and carry on from there, you were just adding a few numbers to what you were already doing, sort of thing, and carrying on. So it was. You weren't thinking in terms of keys at all. It was just pure numbers and notes,
So how long would a typical composition take to put together? So if you use Ghouls and Ghosts as an example.
Not that long. I remember spending probably a few days on each tune or something like that. Maybe, yeah. Not so. I mean, for a game, I suppose it's about like 8 to 9 tunes or something like that. Probably not even that, actually, thinking about it. So yeah, probably a couple of weeks, 3 weeks.
So games like Ghouls and Ghosts and Bubble Bobble were arcade conversions.
Yeah.
So did you stay within the confines of those original arcade tunes, or were you allowed some artistic license to play with them?
I'm not sure I was allowed it, but I took it. Because I think we had to sort of pay lip service to the fact that it was a conversion, so we had to kind of take the tune, if it was a noticeable tune, I'd have to take the initial theme, the melody sort of thing. But then, of course, I used to get bored of that quite quickly and just try and do something else more interesting than that. Not, in my mind, not necessarily more interesting, certainly not better, but, it was kind of just something to keep me occupied, basically, try and do something else with it,
So let's remind ourselves of the scene. Now it's around 1988. The number 1 is I Should Be So Lucky by Kylie Minogue. Closely followed in number 2 by The Only Way Is Up by Yaz and the Plastic Population.
Wow.
But the big names in the video game music industry, of course, were Rob Obard, Martin Galway, and Ben Daglish, among others. Yeah. Did you see them as an inspiration or competitors?
No, well, not really competitors. I kind of, when I first got into the Commodore 64, I hadn't really listened to any music on the Commodore 64, so someone played me quite a lot of Rob Hubbard stuff and said, he's kind of, at that point, he's kind of considered like probably the most prolific, best. And so I listened to a lot of that and thought, oh, right, so he's, I can hear what he's doing there. And so I kind of plagiarized some of that, the techniques he was using, and thought, coded that, got the programmer to code them into my music driver. But yeah, I didn't really listen to, everyone was doing their own thing, and there wasn't really I didn't sense any competition or anything like that. No, it was just we were all doing our own thing,
Rob Hubbard wasn't sending you hate mail or anything like that.
Not that I didn't get it. If you did, no.
Okay.
Probably, maybe you did.
But you mentioned there you picked some things out of Rob Hubbard's methods. Could you always listen to a competitor's tune, and with your trained ear, did they sometimes get things past you? Made you think, well, I've got no idea how they did that.
There were a couple of things I thought, oh, what's he doing there? They were generally technical things that I kind of just didn't know about, and so I'd ask the programmer what that was, and I think mostly, we kind of worked it out. There weren't that many things you could do with the chip, so it was kind of...
So that relationship with the programmer was quite key to getting the quality of tune.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. It was a guy called Steve Ruddy that wrote the Commodore 64 driver, and I think he was very intuitive about the whole thing, he kind of just got it straight away, so it's good, a good programmer.
So, how was your music received by the game studios when you submitted your work? Was it generally just accepted first time, or was it common for them to come back and ask you to make changes?
No, at that point, no. The music wasn't even... It was almost a sort of bonus, if it came with music, that's great. We don't really care, So we didn't get any feedback on music, really, until we started developing for the SNES, I think.
Okay, so you never had like a flat-out rejection or anything like that?
No, but not that we would have, you know what I mean? As in, I don't think that was a practice at the time, you know what I mean? I think they just let music go, regardless of what it sounded like, I don't think that was a reflection on my ability or anything.
Can you remember any games that you would have liked to work on that you didn't have the opportunity? They just gave you work to get on with it.
Yeah, I just did the work that I was given, yeah. And I know a lot of the games that they did aren't particularly renowned at this point for being particularly brilliant, but, we were just doing what we got, basically. I think the boss of the company, Richard Kay, got as many licenses and, from a business point of view, what seemed to be the best options, so we just had to roll with those.
And when you were tasked with writing game music, did you write on demand for the game, or did you have this pot of music that you'd made and you could sort of adapt for a game where appropriate?
I more or less on demand, although there were a few things that I kind of remember tinkering around, usually for another game that I thought, well, that just really doesn't work, I did have some quality control on what, only a little bit, but, on what would fit and what wouldn't fit. And I know there were a couple of tunes that definitely didn't fit for the game that I then used for later games, that's all. Yeah.
So we're going to dip our toe in the world of consoles now.
Right.
And there's another marathon bar
Ooh.
Up for grabs for whoever can name the tune.
I think this is a bit more of a difficult
system.
one.
And the system.
And
You
the
think so, up the
system.
answer?
Tune and system. Okay, yes, please. Difficult this time. NES? Not Sonic, no. Not Sonic on the NES. Okay, you're all going to get it in a second. Who said that? This young man said it. What's your name, please?
Graham.
And well done, Graham.
So, Neil, just before you go on with your line of questioning for Tim, is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, I didn't write that.
You could have got away with that.
Yeah. No, my brother wrote it. Jeff wrote it.
Okay, so you're credited on it. So what's your
I think I probably
involvement
I think
on
we
that?
kind of co-wrote it. I think we did a few tunes each.
Yeah,
sort of thing.
because on your credits,
Yeah.
there are some where you're a composer, there's some where you're arranger, and then
Really?
there are some where you're co-composer. But that one was straight up credited as composer. But well, Wikipedia.
yeah.
We know what that's
Wikipedia.
like sometimes.
Yeah.
So
I don't know who.
okay, so you were kind of involved.
Kind of. No, I
Okay.
think we both did it. I think I remember Jeff did a lot of that. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Can you name another NES tune that you wrote then, just to give us
Another
something to
NES
think
tune.
about instead of Indiana Jones?
well, I mean, the one that seems to crop up.
Well,
Most.
maybe perhaps before going into that though, let's touch upon a little bit about your relationship with Jeff in terms of your your
Yeah.
video game music, because you're all kind of in.
In the same
Yeah.
thing, yeah. Well, Jeff was, he was kind of not technical, really. I think by his own admission, he wasn't particularly technical. And he was working for the Potato Marketing Board at the time. And he was pushing a wheel on a stick around fields for a living. And he kind of measuring the fields and spraying potatoes with dye and things, and hating it. And myself and my older brother Mike were working, obviously sitting in a nice office, kind of apparently not doing very much and getting paid a lot more for it than he was at the time. And so I kind of said, well, you can probably have a go at doing this. We're all sort of got the same genetics, you know what I mean? We're pretty much. We could probably have a crack at doing this. And he kind of really took to it, and so he kind of ended up getting the job working at Software Creations with me. So.
How did it make you feel as a sibling for him to kind of walk out of the potato field and into the studio and start bashing out good tunes?
Sick. No, he didn't. No, I knew he would be able to do it. It wasn't that surprising that he could do it, because he even though he wasn't technically, he was certainly able to pick it up. You know what I mean? He wasn't. When I say he wasn't technically, he wasn't particularly interested. He wasn't a nerd like me and my older brother, tinkering with computers sort of thing. But he was certainly able to do it. And so, I was, as long as I looked after the technical side of it. This is how you key it in. This is the effects you use, and this is what you do to achieve that. Teach him how to do various tricks and things. He was, was able to just do that. I mean, that was obviously a conversion of Indiana Jones. A lot of the music. We did Tom and Jerry as well, I think, and another game I can't remember. It was Thomas the Tank Engine, which he could more or less, all the tunes were already there. So you could just compose them, convert them.
So that was on the NES. You also find yourself writing, well, in the early 90s, you're writing for the Spectrum, the C64, the Amiga, the Atari ST, the NES, and then you start contributing to handheld systems as well. So a huge range of systems. You're juggling all of these platforms. Did you have some more advanced tools to ease writing a tune and then getting it out to all of the platforms, or were you writing individually for each?
No,
one?
I was writing individually for each platform. Okay. Yeah, there was. I know what you mean. There was, because at that point the systems were so specific in what you could do and what you couldn't do. You really just couldn't. It would have caused more problems than it solved. Trying to write once and.
And with that range of all the different sound chips.
Yeah.
Does one come to the front of your mind as the favourite that you
As the
like to work
favourite?
with? Yeah.
I only ever did one game that wasn't even released for the Genesis, the Sega Genesis, which was an FM chip, which was used in keyboards at the time, like a DX7 sound. I can remember that keyboard. It was a similar chip that was used in that, that was the one I ended up enjoying most in terms. It seemed to have the most flexibility and the most sort of possibilities. And at that point, I was working for a company called Malibu Interactive, which were a very short-lived comic book company based in LA that had opened offices in Britain. And that folded after about 18 months, I think, and that was the end of that. So the game didn't get published, and I didn't get to work on the Genesis again after that, because it was more or less at the end of its life at that point anyway, So
yeah, and as you progress through these systems to the newer systems, you come onto systems that are geared more towards allowing you to use sampled sounds.
Yeah.
So things like you had the Pooler chip in the Amiga.
That's the right level of enthusiasm.
that's
yeah.
what right.
So you could start using sampled sounds. Did these help with your creativity, or did they come with their own set of problems?
Yeah, I mean, the sample, I mean, I didn't do much on the Amiga. To be honest, I hated the Amiga. Even though...
Yeah.
A little bit of support for that. The Amiga was... Do you know what it was with the Amiga, though? Is that it pretended to be much better than it actually was. Yeah. It did. I'm not necessarily... I'm talking about sound-wise, purely.
It was a sound chip made in 1984, so...
This is true, yeah.
It was an old chip.
I think what it was, though, because when the SNES came along, it was so much better musically, than the Amiga. But one of the problems with the Amiga was that you could allot the memory as much as memory as you liked, sort of thing. Yeah. But of course, I was always with programmers who would give me like this tiny sliver of memory, and that's what I had to work with, So it was always annoying because you could probably do something much better on it, but they wouldn't give me the memory to do it.
So it wasn't the Amiga then; it was the programmers. It wasn't nothing wrong with the Amiga.
I'll let you have that. Yeah. Amiga was terrible.
So the home micros, a lot of us obviously had them, and they were quite accessible to us in the fact you could turn it on and in BASIC type in some commands and make it beep.
Yeah.
Not to the standard of your beeps, of course.
Similar standard.
But to us, consoles are like a different story because most of us wouldn't have had access to dev kits. So did you feel you were working on something special when you shifted to console?
Not really. I didn't really... No, not really. The strange thing about the NES, which was the first console we worked on, was that back when it was launched in Britain, it'd already been on sale for quite a long time, I think, in Japan and I think North America, but it was, it wasn't such a big thing in Britain. And it was kind of, I remember seeing it, and all of us in Software Creations, looked at it and thought, hang on a minute, this is a bit of a backward step, isn't it? It looked like a retro computer then, when we were working on it. So it was a bit odd, going back, because certainly sound-wise, it wasn't a great improvement. It wasn't really an improvement over the Commodore. I think it was worse, to be honest, in many ways. But
did you ever get any sort of extra scrutiny? Because I think Nintendo had to put their seal of approval.
They did, but I don't remember being scrutinised that much, to be honest, at the time. As I say, I think that was more to do with the fact that it wasn't really... if you did anything that was vaguely musical, they were quite happy with it, so it wasn't sort of like I was,
the quality of a song is quite subjective. If you like it, you like it.
Yeah, and I think I was trying to do something different with it, so they were quite happy that I was sort of pushing it a little bit,
Okay, I'm going to throw in another tune very quickly here. This is on the NES, so have a quick listen to this. Oh, and Marathon Bar. Okay. I'll be very impressed if someone gets this. It's a stonking tune.
Yeah, okay, we have a winner. Well done. It is indeed Pictionary.
Tim confirms he did write it. So, Tim, what right does Pictionary have to a tune like that?
Right. Well, yeah, I think that, you were saying about having pieces written before the thing. I didn't actually for Pictionary. It was kind of, I remember thinking I had a few ideas I wanted to try out, and Pictionary came along, and I remember standing in the office saying, well, it's Pictionary.
What does Pictionary sound like?
What does Pictionary sound like? It sounds like kind of scribbly, doesn't it? What is that? And I think I went around the houses for a while thinking, what on earth can I do for Pictionary? And then just thought, I'll just write some music and see if it fits, or rather not see if it fits, just write some music and make it fit.
So they didn't give you some sort of brief or anything? It's just...
No, because it was kind of, Pictionary was written for, who was the publisher? Do you know the publisher on Pictionary? It was a...
Brothers?
Yeah, it was like an American...
Hasbro, something.
Well, yeah, it was one of those sort of,
Milton Bradley?
Was it? Because but we were like a few layers down, so we were the developer working for the publisher. And by the time it got to us, we sort of just thought, this is ridiculous, but it's a good contract, business-wise, let's just do it. And what's bizarre is that they never commented on the music. They just didn't say anything about it at all. We just thought, yeah, fine, thanks.
They're happy with that.
So, yeah, people really didn't scrutinise.
So in that tune, of course, we can hear all sorts of guitar riffs and bends. Something you build on in our next tune, which takes us to the Super Nintendo. Let's have a listen, Marathon Bar fans. Right.
Who said it? What's your name, young man?
Matthew.
You well done, Matthew. Rock and roll racing on the SNES.
Yeah.
Look at it. Okay, so there, of course, rock and roll racing. And how long and painful those videos seem when you get the answer instantly. So rock and roll racing, it makes me super nostalgic. So remember playing that a lot with my brother. So what sound hardware were you working with in the SNES at the time? And did you have to work hard to get it to produce that sort of CD quality level of sound?
Yeah, it was that. I mean, in a way, the rock and roll racing was more of a technical challenge than anything else. But I knew all the tunes, so it was Bad to the Bone, and there was some Highway Star, I think, Deep Purple. What else was there? I remember them all.
I had a list originally.
Yeah,
I deleted it.
Yeah. But I knew, because I was I was into rock music at that point, you know what I mean? So I kind of knew all those things, and thought...
Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, all those kind of tunes.
Wasn't it? Yeah, Black Sabbath. So I kind of thought, here's my chance, to try and squeeze... Because, the thing with the SNES, it was, again, tiny amount of memory, so you had to fit in these samples that were just so small, so a few K or something to fit in a cymbal or So I had to just basically improvise and try and find ways of, more of a technical challenge than anything else, because obviously I wasn't composing those, I was converting them, But I actually enjoyed that probably more than a lot of things, because of the technical side of it,
By this point, you had a reputation as one of the best composers on the scene, to the point where some game reviews spent more time talking about the quality of your music rather than the game itself. A prime example of that is if we go back to Ghouls and Ghosts in Zap 64 on the Commodore 64. Did you pay attention to the reviews of your work in the magazines?
When they were in magazines, I think someone would get them in the office, and I'd probably have a flick through sort of thing. But it was, it's, what people are like. It's just, you can't sort of take it seriously. You know what I mean? So
you didn't need any kind of positive affirmation.
Oh yeah, it's good. It's good to know that it was working. By the time we kind of got those reviews, I'd already been writing for quite a while. I hadn't got any reviews in any, that I'd seen anywhere. So it was kind of quite interesting to sort of think, oh right, people actually did like that, So yeah, it was kind of.
So something that we haven't really covered. You're doing all this at work, but were you doing anything interesting outside of
Interesting.
work? Did you have a life?
Did I have a life outside? I had a girlfriend. Yeah, that was about as interesting as it got, to be honest.
And were you still living in the same area, same part of the UK?
I was travelling a lot. We were working in Manchester, and I was living in St Helens, and I think we moved. I don't know. Yeah, it was probably after some of these games were written. I think I moved away. Moved around a little bit, sort of thing. Not too much.
Games like Rock and Roll Racing were, big hits. Sold a lot of copies. Did you feel that you were being rewarded correctly for your efforts in this work, or did you have to do other work to supplement the video game music?
Yeah, we weren't getting paid a huge amount. I mean, when we were, as I say, when I was sort of 17, when I first got the job, it seemed like we were obviously getting a decent money, compared to sort of my brother's potato farming or whatever it was. But it wasn't. Having said that, it was only sort of a few thousand more or something. It wasn't kind of. We weren't getting a huge amount. I think at the end, one of the things with Software Creations towards the end was he wasn't really, he more or less capped all the wages at a certain level, and we started to realise, and various people started to think, hang on a minute, we've been working here for sort of 5 years now, sort of thing, and we're doing these things, and we're only getting paid 13,000 or whatever it was at the time, So it wasn't, a huge amount of money.
There was no performance-related pay bonuses or anything like that. Not for the musicians.
He was more of a stick than a carrot sort of person, So, because he used to, this strange. Not long before we left altogether, he introduced a clocking in system, and said, "Well, you're going to clock in now, because I don't want people misusing my time." It was all about. He was almost like a Victorian workhouse sort of guy, So it was kind of like. You come in at 9 rather, and if you're late, if you're 5 minutes late, I'm going to dock you an hour's pay. So, of course, a lot of people, if they came in at 9:05, they go to McDonald's for an hour. You think, well, I'm not getting paid for that. So,
and I can't imagine clocking in and musician belong in the same sentence ever.
Well, yeah, well, that was how that worked. So we left. Yeah.
So before we go on to a topic I sense is where the gloss is starting to come off the job.
Yeah.
We're now well into the sort of multimedia generation where music is streamed from CD. So here's an example of your work on the PlayStation 2. There's another marathon bar for anyone who can guess the game. But even if you haven't played it, you should be able to guess it.
What system? It's a bonus. You'll still get your marathon bar. PlayStation 2. PlayStation 2, well done, yes.
So that's music streaming from the CD without any limitations whatsoever. So there must have been a seismic approach in how you would go about your work by this point.
Yeah, the limitation became my ability to play the guitar, basically, and financial limitation in what musicians I could actually afford at that point.
So when you say what musicians you could actually afford, so how did you operate?
Well, I mean, basically, I kind of defaulted at that point to kind of just using sequences and samples again. I kind of had this thing where I didn't want to do sampled music if I could help it, because I think, well, if you can do anything, why not do anything? Why not have an orchestra? Why not have whoever you want, whatever you want to do? But so the lack of limitation actually was a big problem, really, because the limitation became budget and ability. I didn't have access to people that I might have been able to. If ideally I would have formed a band to do Starsky and Hutch, I would have got people together and done it properly. But it didn't have the budget for that, so it had to be basically just me doing everything. And so in a way, the freedom was actually a lot more restrictive.
But that guitar pedal that you bought from your first Spectrum Patreon
that came
finally got its day.
Finally came in handy, yeah.
So did you feel that, did you enjoy, though, what the industry had become? Or did you feel a bit nostalgic for the early days?
Yeah, I think
the
I did because...
the PlayStation 2 was the year 2000, just to put it in context.
Was it?
It was
Is that
around
right?
about then that it came out.
Okay.
So, you started in 1985.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of time has passed and the industry has changed in a lot of ways.
And I was completely burned out by that problem. Really, I was doing stuff. I was still writing. I think the last thing I wrote was Lemmings, and I just had enough by that point. Yeah, because it wasn't. I think if it was chip music, I probably could have still done something. But then again, when you've been doing it for that long, it's kind of, I really don't want to do this anymore. I've done this for too long now. So that's how I felt at that point.
So your work in the games industry is now drawing to a close. And you mentioned you sort of started to feel burnt out, and I'm guessing that's why you went on to Pastures New. So what new things did you do?
Well, I had this sort of vague interest in filmmaking and that kind of thing, just as a hobby. And bizarrely, I made a couple of short films as a sort of just something fun to do when I was about that time, 2001 or something. And I actually won a competition in Manchester for short film, and that brought me to, someone that ran a TV company locally said, we're looking for people to, basically come and work for us. So a complete step into the unknown. I started doing that and ended up making TV adverts for a living.
Any that we might know? Were the UK adverts?
Early on, we did Vistaprint adverts and things like that.
Okay.
Business
cards.
Business cards, just a lot of rubbish, basically, yeah. But the company that I ended up co-founding a company after that TV company went bust. We set up an advertising company with two other guys called ABF Pictures, and they're still in business, but I've kind of quit that as well. I was working by that point, I was just DPing. I was just lighting adverts and things like that.
So what does DP mean?
Director of photography, so
okay.
Quite grand, isn't it? Yeah, that's basically just turning up and lighting scenes, So I've done a lot of lighting sofas,
So if we look back, Tim, on your career in video game music creation, are you happy with your legacy, or if you could go back and have your time again, would you do anything differently?
I would pay more attention to the games I was writing for. I think Pictionary is a point, a case in point, because that was, I did get kind of quite divorced from what I was doing, and so I think, because I know, I worked on Echo the Dolphin for Sega, and when I went down there to see them, Richard Jakes, who's the in-house composer, wasn't the in-house composer for Sega at the time, was kind of, basically trying to get me back into the industry, and was, he was kind of really... he's a really nice guy, Richard, but the amount of work he was producing is just phenomenal. He was kind of, he still does it, he goes out and records orchestral stuff in Prague all the time, and he just puts out so many hours of stuff, it's kind of just hour after hour of music, and I just think, I just can't do that, I can't do that. So it's, yeah, I don't know. What was the question?
Well, if you had your time again, would you do it?
Would I do it differently?
I think you did.
I was sorry. I think, I think if I'd paid more attention to the games and maybe been more interested in the games at the time, I could have probably pursued it more, and gone into it. That budget restraint probably wouldn't have been as much of an issue, and so maybe I would have been able to get to a point of doing games that I would have been interested in doing,
So I think that the takeaway, though, that I'm getting from this, I think we're all getting, is that, though, if you could do it again, you would still do it, right? You would still do video game music.
Oh, well, yeah, I was. Through absence of anything else to do, to be honest. Yeah.
So, well, thank you for answering our questions, Tim. It's now time for the audience Q&A.
Oh.
I hope you have some good questions, because I've got some marathon bars. left. Let's hear one of the last tunes Tim made in the games industry before your questions. And even if you haven't heard this before, there are nods to a more retro version of the same game. So have a guess anyway.
There's a lot of marathon bars left, so we need questions.
Right, so my question is, my best memories of your work are actually from the Spectrum 128K and probably even more so the Atari ST, which obviously shared a really similar sound.
Oh, right, yeah, why?
So the same music was used on both.
Yeah.
Stuff like, Bubble Bobble, Ghouls and Ghosts, Bionic Commando was another really good one I remember, and probably the best one that I remember that a lot of people actually regard as one of the best tunes on the ST. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on making it, and it was Leadstorm.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, that was the AY chip, which was...
The YM in the ST, AY in the Spectrum, yeah.
Yeah. So it was kind of the same, I was using the same...
Yeah, you had more memory to play with in the ST, larger samples. That was about the only difference, really.
Yeah. I don't even remember making the most of it, because I think it was kind of like, because it was the same chip, I think we used exactly the same code for both.
It was always exactly the same, yeah.
Yeah, it would have been. But both of those, I think, were a conversion of the Amiga tunes.
Well,
so, yeah.
Leadstorm on the Atari ST version is 1,000,000 times better than the Amiga tune.
Boo.
I'm not just saying that. Listen to them side by side, and the ST tune is so much better.
Right, okay. Yeah. To be honest, I don't remember it. I don't remember it that well. Oh, well, thank you. But I don't remember it.
Neil, do you have any questions from over there?
I think Kieran's already had his marathon bar, so I don't want to give you type 2 diabetes, Kieran. We'll keep holding. Question, yes, sir, in the yellows.
Hi. Nowadays, a lot of things are done with virtual instruments and stuff like that. Have you ever been tempted to go back to revisit some of your older tunes and kind of create a kind of mix of old and new?
I haven't, to be honest. I mean, it's kind of... I kind of do think about doing it. Not if I was going to go revisit the old stuff, I think I'll probably want to do it in a completely different format, rather than using, a sample sort of thing. But then again, I don't know. Maybe
orchestral version of Agent X or something.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's kind of to me that would be more interesting. You know what I mean? To go back and do something completely different with it. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I wouldn't mind if I get some time at some point.
One more over here.
Hi there.
Hello.
Just to go back to the Commodore 64 version of Leadstorm, it has a very deep purple smoke on the water style intro.
Oh, yeah.
So I actually really love it. And the music all the way through. So, in fact, I'm not even a big fan of the game, but the music's excellent. So
I remember it now. Yeah. It was the guitar. It starts off with
and then it goes into your own style thing that's very recognisable.
I remember that because it used the filters on the Commodore to distort it.
Yes,
but it didn't work in every Commodore, so it sounded completely different on everyone's system. So you might have got a good one, and everyone else just thinks that sounds terrible.
Sounds fantastic in mine. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Cheers.
Are there any video game series that you think you would have liked to compose for? And maybe
Video game series?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there are lots really. I think I kind of listen to, because my kids play a lot of games now that I kind of think the music's really, really good now. I mean, it's kind of. I think it'd be nice to have worked on something like that. I mean, when I was playing Skyrim all the time, so it's kind of, I think, well, it'd be great to sort of, do something big and orchestral and something atmospheric like that. But yeah, I'm not going to get a chance. Don't want to think about it.
Okay, one back here.
Afternoon. Was there any opportunity to work on the Mega Drive version of Rock and Roll Racing?
Oh, sorry. What was? Sorry.
Sorry. Was there any opportunity to work on the Mega Drive version of Rock and Roll Racing?
No. Strangely enough, we didn't do any Mega Drive stuff. When I was, that was a game that we did through Software Creations, which was the first company I worked for. The Manchester-based company, and for some reason they didn't have a contract with Sega. So they had the contract with Nintendo, and they had these sort of subcontracts with Activision and a few people, but we never did any Sega development at that point through Software Creation, so it was never an option. Yeah.
I'm really surprised. 'Cause
I don't know why.
I think Rock and Roll Racing holds a very special place in my heart. So.
Right. Well, it would have been good. I mean, the thing is, having worked on the Genesis one I did later on, it was ideally suited for it. It would have been great, to do a conversion on that.
Yeah, I just thought you might have been asked because.
No, didn't get asked, no.
Yeah.
There you go. Business.
Okay.
I guess now modern music tends to morph kind of based upon mood. So when you're in danger. When you're in danger, the kind of pace of the music picks up and it kind of flows from fast to slow. Is that something you've ever had to think about?
The thing is, it's not really, and it's kind of the kind of thing that now I would obviously, that would be a big thing. And Richard Jakes I was talking about was telling me about having to layer music, which is kind of quite common now, where you have different tracks playing simultaneously. Where and having the problem of having to score that, because obviously if you've got an orchestral recording, you've got to synchronize several different tracks with an orchestra, which is incredibly hard to do.
Right. So are you essentially fading from kind of the out of danger track into the in danger track?
Yeah, that seems to be.
Everything has to sync up. So
yeah. So it's literally, you just bring it into a sequence. I think he just tinkers around with the timings to make everything line up, and make it work, sort of thing. But it's a kind of technical challenge. It's the kind of thing I would have liked to do, just to see if it's possible to do it. But there you go. Yeah.
Tim, it was great to hear your work. But what do you listen to these days, and what would you recommend I should put my iPod that I might not have on there already?
Difficult question. What do I listen to? I'm listening to all kinds of random things, to be honest. I'm sort of in the middle of making a game, funnily enough. Having said that, I don't play games. I'm making a sort of, kind of horror game type of thing at the moment. And I'm listening to all kinds of music just to try and get inspiration for that. So I'm listening to, honestly, just bizarre things like Ligeti and strange classical pieces like that. But also, I think, I listen to pretty much anything that's harmonic or interesting. Yeah, it's difficult to say. I listen to Jazz FM, unfortunately, which is full of rubbish. But
and is Genesis still on your playlist?
Well, do you know what? I haven't listened to any prog for a long time, and I actually just recently started listening to some really old stuff again. I'm thinking, it's quite good, actually. Yeah.
I'm down to my last marathon bar. Marathon bar? Question over here.
I already got. Hello, is this thing on? Yes. I already got my marathon bar. Well, just a short question I have is: did you have to write two versions for the console games music because of the PAL NTSC? Thing?
For the two. Now that's an interesting question, because we only ever wrote the 50 hertz PAL versions of everything. And it wasn't retimed. And I remember asking the programmers, can you sort of, I mean, it would have been easy enough to do, because it was, the way it worked technically was every cycle it would do a little bit of, update the music sort of thing. So you'd literally only be accessing the pitch changes and everything every cycle, So it would have been easy enough to drop a frame, and it wouldn't have sounded that bad, I don't think, but they just didn't. So everything in America runs at much too fast. Yeah. So I listened to. I mean, I heard someone send me a link to a YouTube video with something, and it sounded, that's what they're used to hearing, But obviously, no, it wasn't written like that. No, it was all 50 hertz and never adjusted. Yeah. So.
Okay, this is my last question over here.
So a lot of the games that you were composed for were not very critically renowned.
Acclaimed.
Yeah. How does it feel to you that a lot of the games now are sort of remembered just solely for your music?
Yeah, just bizarre. Honestly, just completely bizarre to me. I still don't get it, really. It is odd because I was saying before, when it first, I remember first getting, when I first got the internet, which was sort of 90, whatever it was, late 90s or something, starting to get the odd email from people and thinking, and at the time I remember dismissing it as like, well, this is just nostalgia, this is people who can remember it, you know what I mean? And it's kind of, that's all it is. It might as well, could have been anything, it's just something that reminds you of that particular time, which is fine, But then for it still to be happening now is kind of, just freak to me. So it's just odd.
Okay, and this is my last question.
Hiya, I was just wondering, Rob Hubbard done a conversion of all his music into symphony music. It was on the BBC. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Would you consider doing that yourself?
Well,
because it's like what they were saying was like bips and bobs, and they're trying to convert it into actual music. Would you do that?
Well, the thing is, Chris Abbott that organised that is. Right. Been asking me to do that.
Oh.
He did ask me a while. He's given up, I think. I remember him mentioning it a while ago, and I don't know if I don't know if I just said no at the time or I'm not interested. I probably gave him the impression I wasn't interested.
Well, would you do it?
I wouldn't mind having a go at it. Yeah, I mean, it would be. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe.
Thank you.
I mean, Rob Hubbard actually worked with an arranger, didn't he? I think, and he got someone in. Yeah, so no.
It's good to hear you're not completely ruling it out. No. That's great. It's great that we might hear that. Well, thank you for your questions. I think you delved into some of the more technical things as well, which was really nice to hear. And thank you for answering those and all of our questions, Tim. I think all that remains to say is thank you from me, Andrew, and from the audience here for the music that you created that really resonates through our gaming lives. And yeah, thank you very much, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.